Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, race fans. Welcome to another Trackalicious stream. Tonight we've got ACC action, GT3 cars going around Watkins, Glen. My name is Kuja Terekov, and I will be on the ones and twos for today's race. We've got a quick 50-minute race, 10-minute qualifying before that. So without any further ado, let's get right to the qualifying session, which is underway currently. Let's see what's going out on track at the moment here. Carlos Guzman rolling out of the pits in the Ford Performance number 39 Mustang. No drivers yet to set a lap time, just 2 minutes in. We can see on the track map just a few drivers getting prepared at the end of the laps for the start of the qualifying session. Hope everybody in the chat is doing well. Welcome along. We've got the season opener tonight of the West Coast Wednesday League, and of course plenty more racing to go on Wednesdays with an 8-round championship. Signups are still open on SimGrid, so if you want to participate, feel free to sign up there and join in on all of the action. Is that Dr. Porkchop in a Jag? It absolutely is Dr. Porkchop in a Jag. Good spot there from Octane. Roaring around the mighty Jag roars today. 12-car grid so far, maybe a couple of late joiners if we get a few more. So we'll just see what happens here tonight on this late night West Coast Wednesday League starting at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So it is a bit late for a lot of people, so if it works in your schedule, of course, feel free to sign up and join us on Wednesdays, and if not, there's plenty of other racing at Trackalicious as well. No times on the board yet. Still just kind of roaring around. A bit of track limits issues at Watkins Glen, so it's very possible some of the drivers who are have attempted an outlap have picked up that track limit violation and invalidated their flying lap attempt. But Dr. Porkchop here rolling along just fine for now. Let's tune in with Kyle Hirsch and see how he is rolling along in the Dive Bombers McLaren. Going with the McLaren for this season. We've got a time on the board from Curtis Ruston. A 1:45.847 is the benchmark to beat, with just about 4 minutes ticked into the qualifying session, 6 to go. Lots of time for flying lap attempts. Chandler Williams, the championship winner from last time, or from last season I should say, starting it off strongly with the provisional pole time of a 1:43.4 with Jake Finn, Darren Wicks, Potts Weaver, and Curtis Ruston as well setting lap times. Kyle Hirsch unable to do that on this flying attempt. We'll still have a few laps on offer for him to try and get a valid lap on the board and continue through the field. Professor Chronotis in the 42 Ferrari rolling along, starting the lap at the first sector, going up the hill at turns 3 and 4 before going on to the back straight before the bus stop chicane. In fact, let's ride on board with the Ferrari and see how he handles the rest of the lap. Going really aggressively onto the curves to try and really maximize the lap time. You really do have to take those pretty aggressively, let the car kind of bounce and idle pretty or hope the car bounces and idles well through the curbs as it chops down a lot of lap time. Being pretty delicate applying the throttle into the entrance of the toe. This is a pretty tricky corner to get right. Lots of camber helping the driver feed into the apex and get on the power pretty early as they charge up the hill into the braking zone of the heel, which is again a pretty tricky corner to get right as the hill kind of bottoms out here. And the driver needs to really get in on the apex early to apply the power, as well as this corner, the camber breaks away, so it's even more difficult to get the power down as the rear tends to slide away, but Chronotis is doing an excellent job of handling the Ferrari through there. And then a near flat corner to end the lap, and unfortunately I think Chronotis is going to run a little bit wide and pick up a track limit violation there. And then just one corner to go before blasting down to the start-finish line and starting another flying attempt. Unfortunately, not a valid lap this time around. Alex Freeman joining in the West Coast Wednesday League as well. We saw him racing on Mondays in the GT4s. Good to see him out on track in the number 14 McLaren. Currently sits in 4th place, 1.5 seconds off of pole position with just under 3.5 minutes left. Should have about 2 more flying lap attempts to improve that lap time and see if he can get closer to the championship winner from last season. Carlos Guzman joining as well. We saw him rolling out of the pit lane at the beginning of the qualifying session, able to put down a lap time of a 1:45.215 for his best time so far, but now crosses the line and improves on that attempt and goes into 3rd place overall onto the 2nd row of the grid. Just 1.1 seconds off of pole position. Still a little bit of time to gain in that Mustang, as Guzman is going to line up a couple of more attempts in this qualifying session. Good to see a Nissan out on the grid. Darren Wicks representing the Japanese manufacturer in the number 46 Nissan. Currently sits in 9th place, but just crosses the line to improve up to 4th, 1.2 seconds off of pole with a 1:44.4. Still time left on the clock. Lots of improvements still on offer for Darren Wicks. Let's see how high he can get that Nissan before time runs out in the qualifying session. Two Nissans on the grid. The Please Brake T1 Nissan driven by Jake Finn in the number 43. A nice teal color. Good, nice big fan of the mint, teal, blue, whatever you want to call it. I'm a fan. And I believe the Jag of Porkchop is sporting a similar color. So good to see a nice minty fresh cars out on track. Currently in 2nd place is Jake Finn. Just 4/10 off of Chandler Williams, who still occupies pole position with a 1:43.255. Really impressive lap time around the dark, around Watkins Glen in such cold conditions. So good to see. The grid is actually super tight through the entirety of it, so it'll be a fun race to watch despite it being a slightly small grid with just 12 cars lined up on track. Just under a minute to go in qualifying, so anybody who crosses the line before the checkered flag waves is able to finish their lap and hopefully improve on their last go around. This will be the last go around for Jake Finn, hopefully not running too wide there on the exit of turn 1 to pick up a track limit and invalidate this lap time, as this will more than likely be his last qualifying attempt. Carlos Guzman, Darren Wicks in the pits in 3rd and 4th will not be improving on their lap times. Neither will Curtis Rustin and Artem, who are sitting in the pits currently in 8th and 10th respectively. Alex Freeman back to the pits, Pottsweaver as well. Just a few drivers left out on track as the qualifying timer hits 0. The checkered flag will be waving now as Jake Finn entering the boot, starting at the toe. Talking about this corner earlier, lots of camber that could really help the driver use the power around the corner to try and charge up this hill down this kind of mini straight before a heavy braking zone, which will be a good overtaking attempt during the race if drivers can have a good overspeed out of that exit. And Chandler Williams and Jake Finn, the last two out on track. Chandler Williams, the Mustang we hear in front of Jake Finn here, occupying that top position with Jake Finn not too far behind. We'll see just where they finish up when they cross that start-finish line. Chandler Williams will cross the line first. Let's see if he can improve on his lap time. And he does, a 1:43.067. Jake Finn improves as well to stay within half a second of Chandler Williams. And then a bit of a gap to Guzman, 1.3 seconds as well to Darren Wicks. And then Chronotis, Weaver, Freeman, Rustin, Hirsch, Artem, Watt, and Porkchop will round out our grid here today. Should be a fun race. 50 minutes of action ahead with one mandatory pit stop in the middle or whenever the driver elects to take it. I believe there is a pit window, but it opens 1 minute into the race and closes 1 minute before the race ends. So that should provide for some interesting strategy calls. There is a 25-second mandatory time to refuel. However, drivers do not have to take tires, and it is their choice if they want to add 5 seconds to their pit stop time to take fresh rubber and have that advantage towards the end of the race. Night conditions during qualifying, daytime and bright and sunny during the 50-minute race we have ahead of us. And speaking of the race we have ahead of us, let's take a look at our starting grid. Continuing the pace from last season, Chandler Williams, the championship winner in the number 3 Please Brake T1 Mustang, will start on pole position. In second place, the teammate in Please Brake T1 in the Nissan, the number 43 of Jake Finn, will occupy the front row alongside Chandler Williams. Carlos Guzman, another Ford in the top 5. The Ford Performance number 39 will line up behind the pole sitter in front. Darren Wicks, 2 Fords front to back, 2 Nissans front to back. In the number 46 is Darren Wicks. Professor Chronotis in 5th place in the number 42 Ferrari, the first one we see on the grid today, followed by Potts Weaver in the very fun and colorful livery in the number 13 McLaren, with teammate in the McLaren Alex Freeman just behind in the number 14. Curtis Rustin in the 868 Ferrari Derive Motorsport will sit in 8th place. Kyle Hirsch in the Dive Bombers number 21 McLaren will sit in 9th. 10th place is Matt Artem in the America United Racing number 414 Audi. Always fun to see a good mixed grid today, which we do have for you. Buggy Watt in the McLaren, the number 410, sits in 11th place. Last but not least, the fan favorite, the Jag, the Chop Shop Racing, the 71, driven by Dr. Porkchop himself. Thanks to everybody watching. Hope you are enjoying the stream so far. Fun 50-minute race ahead between all of these guys who are good friends on and off the track. Should see some good, clean racing around Watkins Glen. Really fun track in the East Coast in New York. Lots of corners, but a lot of them aren't actually corner numbers, so I think it's technically a 10 or 11 corner track, despite a few corners not being counted like the bus stop. The bus stop does not count as any corner at all, so you just kind of count that as a straight. So I guess you could technically barrel straight through it and hopefully maximize your lap time. Just kidding, there's concrete barriers there, and that'll destroy the front end entirely, and that'll ruin the race of the driver. And we don't want to see that, so make sure you take the bus stop safely and fairly. But as we saw during the qualifying, you really do need to take those curbs pretty heavily to gain an advantage in lap time. It'll be fun to see how far the Jag will work their way through the field. Dr. Porkchop electing for the fun choice this season. Gonna be driving the Jag. It's always fun to hear the roar of the Jag too. It just sounds so different compared to a lot of the other cars on the grid. The Mustang, I would say, is the only one. Maybe the Lexus too sound pretty similar. But yeah, it just has a great noise, the Jag, and the look of it is just so fun. It's just kind of a really small, compact little thing, kind of like the Alpine is into the GT4s. But the Alpine is I would say, a bit more of a competitive car, as the Jag is a little bit more outdated. Nonetheless, drivers on the formation lap, getting the tires warmed up, getting the brakes warmed up around this medium length, I would say, Watkins Glen track. Lots of fun medium speed corners, lots of like swooping corners, I would say, where you don't really have a choice of line. There really is just one line that is fastest. So side-by-side racing will be fun to see around places like that, where one driver will have to take, or I guess more or less both drivers will have to take slightly suboptimal lines and bring in action from the back to the front. And of course, always going to be fun to see how turn one goes. Always pretty well behaved in these West Coast Wednesdays. A nice chill racing evening. Everybody's kind of late at night, just enjoying a nice fun 50-minute race with a pit stop in between. Again, always interesting to see what sort of pit time is going to happen, whether drivers do elect to change tires and go on the fresh rubbers and have that advantage in the closing stages of the race. Now, the grid is forming up for the start, lining up in 2x2 from 1st to 12th tonight, both wherever you're watching today or tonight, morning, evening. Always happy to have you here at the Trackalicious streams. One corner to go before they get onto the main straight, where the green flag will wave and it'll release our 12 drivers for 50 minutes of action ahead. Last minute preparations, getting the brakes, the tires, getting the drivers themselves warmed up for the start, and the green flag will wave. Who's gonna get the best run into turn one? Chandler Williams is gonna have the inside, but the Nissan looks pretty aggressive on the outside, and nothing to do it there. Chronotis with a nice aggressive move down the inside is gonna take 4th place away from Wicks and is gonna try to charge after Guzman in front, who himself is gonna stay pretty close to the tail of Jake Finn in 2nd place. Big straight line speed advantage for the Nissan over the Ferrari behind. Is going to tuck out of the slipstream. Chronotis is going to take to the inside and is going to have to defend into the bus stop, and does so just fine. Goes a little bit wide through the exit portion though, but able to keep that Ferrari under control and not giving the position up behind. Kyle Hirsch looking pretty racy here, as well as Potts Weaver. The 3 McLarens lining up back to front to back. Potts Weaver leading the charge of those 3, with Freeman and Hirsch trying to improve their positions, with Matt Artem in the Audi looking pretty aggressive at the start as well. Nice clean getaway, everybody rolling around just fine. Chandler Williams able to get a good getaway, with Jake Finn and Guzman maintaining 2nd and 3rd, but Chronotis with a good move to the inside of turn 1, able to take 4th place away from Darren Wicks, and then Potts Weaver, Kyle Hirsch, Alex Freeman. Oh, a bit of a slide there from Hirsch, but able to keep it under control, just losing a little bit of time to the car in front, but still keeping that McLaren rolling. And then Rustin in 10th, Buggy Watt 11th, and the Jag of Pork Chop sits in 12th place. Jake Finn able to pull a pretty decent gap away from Guzman. Was looking a little bit under pressure from the Mustang behind, but that gap has opened up a fair bit, a bit more comfortable to where no real move is possible for the Mustang behind just yet. Matt Artem, though, trying to get higher up into the top 10 than he is. Currently sits in 9th. Gonna try to jump a few places and get by the trio of McLarens. He has it. Oh, and there's a spin. I believe that's Kyle Hirsch who has gone off. Let's take a look and see if we can take a look at what happened here. Oh, unfortunately picked up the wrong cam. That was just Matt Artem again. Oh, and unfortunately Freeman goes into the wall, and that is going to be pretty heavy damage to the front of that McLaren. Unfortunate there. I'm not sure who was spun there at the apex. It was the 21s. That was Kyle Hirsch, unfortunately staying to the inside, but unfortunately for others, not hitting him, except for Alex Freeman picking up that damage, going into the wall at the exit of the bus stop chicane. Gap's a bit more opened up. Looked like he ran into the back of Weaver. Yeah, I couldn't quite tell what happened there, but unfortunately for the trio of McLarens, it becomes a duo of McLarens at the back of the grid in 11th and 12th. But Potts Weaver able to keep his position out on track, actually able to get through Darren Wicks, who has dropped down to 6th place after starting in 4th and electing to go into the pits. So maybe there was a bit of contact with the Nissan as well, as they were having a bit of a battle going into that corner. Oh my goodness, Carlos Guzman taking to the curb, getting a little bit slidey. Yeah, it was really hard to see what actually happened there, and I wasn't able to switch over to the correct camera in time, so that is my apologies for that. Dr. Porkchop on the charge, trying to get by Buggy Watt up a few places after the McLarens unfortunately having a few incidents ahead, and trying to get by the McLaren of Buggy Watt. But Buggy covers that inside line really well and not giving Porkchop any sort of looks down the inside here. Let's ride on board with the Jag and just see how Dr. Porkchop is going to try to line up this move past Buggy Watt. Nothing quite here. Gets a good exit though, but so does the McLaren. The Jag maybe just a little bit lacking in straight line speed. With a lot more drivers now coming into the pits. Curtis Rustin coming into the pits a little early, maybe also suffering a bit of damage early on. Alex Freeman we saw going heavily into the wall. Great braking from Porkchop, catching up right to the bumper of the McLaren, but the McLaren able to pull away out of the corners and just not giving Porkchop any sort of looks down any braking zone, covering the inside super well. Porkchop is going to have to try something really fancy and aggressive if he wants to try to get around Buggy Watt, who is defending really well in that 410 orange and white McLaren. There's Curtis Rustin serving the pit stop, rolling out of the pit lane and getting involved in this battle as well. Kyle Hirsch gaining on these two cars battling after having that small spin behind. See what the wing of the McLaren sees. That funny looking face of the Jag just behind. Really catching up in the braking zones, but the McLaren really confident on the power, able to get away and not give Porkchop any sort of looks. And now Kyle Hirsch is joining the battle, turning this two-car battle into a three-car battle. A bit of a McLaren sandwich finds him Porkchop in the middle of a McLaren sandwich. Yummy, delicious, and tasty. Kyle Hirsch looking aggressive though, is going to try to get by Porkchop as quick as he can as Buggy Watt goes a little bit deep into the braking zone, but keeps the power on. And oh, it's a great view of the battle behind. Kyle Hirsch a little bit oversteery on the exit, but is going to have the inside line into the braking zone, just pulls in front of the Jag, and now takes the inside line away. Curtis Rustin behind, we can see in that white Ferrari, trying to get by as well, but he is lapped. But we know Curtis Rustin from the last season has a good bit of pace, so he's going to try to get through the field as quickly as possible, get himself into some open air, as Kyle Hirsch is going to sweep around the outside of the last corner, keep it out of the wall, and gets the position of by Buggy Watt and moves into 7th place. Fantastic move around the outside of the final corner, and now has some breathing room in front. 6.2 seconds to catch up to Potts Weaver, who sits in 6th place. 8.2 seconds adrift of Matt Artem, who himself is 7 seconds of drift of Professor Chronotis in 4th place, Guzman third, Finn having the fastest lap, is 7/10 off of Chandler Williams, but this battle is going to continue. Buggy Watt having a look down the inside, but Kyle Hirsch, confident on the brakes, cuts off that opportunity. The leaders out in front, pulling a 3.5 second gap to Guzman, who occupies that final spot of the podium in third place in the 39 Mustang. A Mustang sandwich, a bit for Jake Finn, a bit more breathing room behind. Really going to try to press Chandler Williams as best as he can. Really going to push the Mustang throughout the 50 minutes. Just to try and claw back any sort of advantage, but Chandler Williams not giving it up, setting the fastest lap of the race, a 1:44.197. Not as tasty as a pork chop sandwich. I agree. A Finn sandwich is, well, I don't know. I've never had a Finn before, so, and I can't say that I really want to. But nonetheless, I agree. A pork chop sandwich, a bit more tasty than the Ford and Nissan combination we find ourselves at the front of the grid. Battle's opening up a little bit. This is the tightest battle we have on the grid. Less than a second separating our leaders at the moment. Kyle Hirsch diving into the pits just 10 minutes into the race. Maybe picking up a bit of damage during that spin that we saw earlier, and electing to come in, fix the damage, maybe put on some fresh tires as well, get into some clean air, put in some clean lap times, and see how far he can get. Taking a bit of a wide line, braking in the grass, that's never helpful. Now the gap is less than half a second between the top two. Let's ride on board with the Nissan and take a look at what Jake Finn is looking at in front of him, with Chandler Williams posting a good defensive position in the Mustang, but running a little bit wide. Don't want to do that too many times as you pick up a drive-through penalty for picking up 4 track limit violations awarded by the game itself. And just like that, we see him running wide yet again. Few times in just 2 corners there for Chandler Williams, and doesn't want to do that for the majority of the race, because he will have to serve a drive-through penalty around here if he does that more than 3 times. That Nissan just not able to close the gap in the straights. The mighty speed of the Mustang pretty evident down the back straights here around Watkins Glen. Bit of a open battles going on here up and down the grid. Our leaders separated by less than half a second, both taking the exit a little bit wide on the entry to the toe of the boot at Watkins Glen. This is of course, the long configuration of Watkins Glen. The NASCAR configurations ignores the boot entirely and just cuts it off straight through there. But this is not NASCAR, this is GT3 racing. We do the full length circuit around here. Chandler Williams diving a little bit deeper into the braking zone than you might anticipate, but it looks like Jake Finn gets an inopportune exit and isn't able to keep that gap close enough to the Mustang to pull off any sort of moves into any braking zones. Pretty big gap as we ride on the wing of the driver sitting in first place. Again, just dipping a wheel a little bit into the grass, running a little bit wide at turn 1. A little bit is fine. The track limits at turn 1 are a lot more lenient than the others around the configuration at Watkins Glen. So turn 1, you are able to get away with a little bit more than you might think, but not quite as much as we saw him do earlier on the previous lap. Taking the bus stop really confidently, taking those curbs really well. The Mustang able to keep the suspension nice and planted on the entries and exits to keep Chandler Williams in the lead of the race, but not out of the woods yet. Pressure is on from Jake Finn. Less than 1 second still separating these two drivers. They have pulled away a pretty significant gap of 7.1 seconds to third place. So they are in a bit of a race of their own at the moment. Maybe Jake Finn just relaxing a little bit on those tires, taking a little bit easy, doesn't want to take the extra 5 seconds during the pit stop to change tires. Whereas we know in the past, Chandler Williams has chosen to take tires before after speaking to us in the interviews. So that is usually his strategy. We'll see what he elects to do when they serve those pit stops. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight on this lovely Wednesday. Hope you're all doing well. Whether you're a fan of racing, a fan of one of the drivers, do let us know if you want to ride on board with somebody, as well as take a look at what sort of action they're getting themselves involved in. Jake Finn now has the fastest lap of the race, a 144.027. That is 2/10 faster on that last lap than Chandler Williams, but we see that power coming into play of the Mustang, pulling that gap to more than half a second in the first sector alone, after Jake Finn is able to get some good lap times in on the Nissan behind and close that gap just a little bit. Chronotis is closing the gap a little bit to Carlos Guzman, 1.5 seconds, so that battle might pick up towards the end of the race in the closing stages for the last spot of the podium. Whereas the gap to Matt Artem in 5th has opened up to 10 seconds, with a 9-second gap to Potts Weaver in 6th. Nice, fun-looking livery for Potts Weaver this season, riding in the number 13 McLaren. Pretty much every color imaginable on that car. Always fun to see the creativity on the grid, and of course feel free to submit yours if you haven't done so yet in the Discord channel too, so that we can broadcast it on the streams here and take a look at the fun creativity we have in store for us amongst all the different cars on the grid tonight. Alex Freeman, after sustaining a bit of damage coming into the pits, is gaining on Kyle Hirsch in front. 1.3 seconds is the gap between the two McLaren drivers who have taken their pit stops. Darren Wicks is the lead car of those who have stopped already. And so we will have to wait and see, with just under 17 minutes gone by in the race. So far, just 4 drivers of our 12 electing to come in for those early pit stops. Darren Wicks, Kyle Hirsch, Alex Freeman, and Curtis Rustin rounding out our grid, sustaining, it looks like, a fair bit of damage. His pit stop time was quite long, so more than likely picking up a pretty significant bit of damage for sure. As well as Alex Freeman, we saw him facing the wall with the front of that McLaren, picking up a pretty, probably hefty bit of damage, but able to get it back to the pits and keeps it rolling, closing the gap ever so slightly to Kyle Hirsch in front of him. There we see the gap between Chronotis and Guzman for that final podium position, currently being occupied by Carlos Guzman in that 39 Mustang. Still no signs of anybody pitting yet, more than likely waiting for that halfway mark of the race. A pretty hot track tonight here at Watkins Glen, potentially eating those tires away. Maybe, oh, Chronotis hitting the curb a little bit heavily and sliding that Ferrari on the exit. Not what you want before a flat out uphill section before hitting this back straight. A little bit unfortunate there for the professor, just catching out the curb in the wrong way. The battle for the lead plows on after 10 minutes of racing, or sorry, after 10 laps of racing, I should say. Almost 20 minutes in to our 50-minute race. Still, everybody rolling out on track. Always good to see the commitment of those, despite a few hiccups from some drivers hitting a few walls, picking up a bit of bumps and bruises onto the cars, but nothing that the pit crew can't fix in the ACC simulator. It's good to see a Nissan battling it out at the front of the grid with a Mustang. Perhaps the Nissan just really planted through the corners. I know from the past the Nissan was super strong on the brakes, able to brake just that touch later than a lot of the other cars at the time. Not sure how it is at the moment though, but Jake Finn able to keep that Nissan right behind the championship winner from last season, still running in the number 3 Mustang for the spring season this time around, and we will see if he can keep that momentum going from last season. Kyle Hirsch running a bit away from Alex Freeman behind, opening the gap to 1.5 seconds. Alex Freeman perhaps just making a few mistakes here and there, but closing in on Freeman on that last lap. Cali Official, thank you, subscribing for 15 months. Much appreciate the love and support here at Trackalicious from everybody, from the admins, from the stewards, from the streamers. Big thank you from all of us to you for the support for such a long time as well. Really love to see that. Thank you once again, and thanks to everybody for the support earlier, everybody watching along with us. Hope you are all having a fantastic evening. Jake Finn still getting pretty squirrely on the exit of, I believe that is turn number 9. The off-cambered corner, just not favoring that Nissan at all, getting really wide on the exit and having to lift off a little bit and maintain the slide and not get quite as close as he wants to the Mustang, which is really able to run away in the first sector. These two are now approaching Darren Wicks in front for lapped traffic. Darren Wicks will of course have blue flags, and knowing these guys, he will respectfully get out of the way of the battle and let them be on their way for Darren Wicks to also just continue in their own race. But it's also pretty good if you are one of those drivers behind to get a bit of a slipstream advantage from these faster cars and just see what sort of help that can do. Chrono in the pits indeed. I was going to mention that after this little battle continued. Now it's a Nissan sandwich going the other way for Chandler Williams, but of course the position in front is being blue flagged. It'll be interesting to see after the pit stop as well for Chronotis if he's able to get some good decent lap times in after being a little bit behind Guzman, maybe just a little bit of dirty air, picking up a disadvantage for the Ferrari driver who has already served that pit stop and is now rolling out of the pit lane into some very, very clean air. Dr. Porkchop running in a bit of no man's land at the moment. 39 seconds, the gap in front. Currently sits in 6th place though, so good positioning for the Jag. Saw him get a few good moves done, so it'll be interesting to see where that Jag ends up finishing after the pit stops as well. But again, always fun to see the Jag out on the grid. just let that cat roar along around the fun and twisty, hilly sections of Watkins Glen. A very fun track. I must say I am a big fan of Watkins Glen driving in ACC. It feels super fun. All of these corners are super challenging in one way or another. The corner pork chop just went through the toe of the boot. Very fun corner. You can pretty much break into the corner and let that hill really slow you down before picking up the power. But this corner, on the contrary, is completely the opposite, where the camber breaks away and it's really difficult to get on the power as early as possible. Really close battle here between our our race leaders. Getting really close is the Nissan to the Mustang. Let's see just how close he can get in the final section, though. We'll ride on board the front wing. As I can see, really confident on the brakes, the Nissan. But that Mustang just has the mighty power to pull away and not let Jake Finn think anything of it. The two teammates in the Please Brake T1 liveries. Very different colors, of course, the black and red for Chandler Williams and the mint color of Jake Finn behind, currently in second place. Now Jake Finn is going to go into the pits, and this will be interesting to see if he can get the undercut. He does have the fastest lap of the race, so maybe just getting held up by that dirty air of the Mustang in front. So this will be very, very interesting to see just where he ends up after both the leaders come into the pit lane. Dr. Porkchop as well. The two mint cars are in the pits. And now Chandler Williams has a bit of breathing room behind, so he can focus on his own lap time. Gonna need to put in some absolutely blinding purple sectors here if he wants to get this overcut done on Jake Finn, who does have really good pace in the Nissan, does have the fastest lap of the race. That is what that purple indicator next to his name in the top left means. That little purple is the fastest lap holder, and the red is the overall race leader, who is Chandler Williams in the Please Brake T1 Mustang, the number 3 machine. Currently sitting on 14 laps completed, rolling on the 15th. It'll be interesting to see if he decides to come into the pits on this lap or not. Matt Artem and Pottsweaver diving into the pits from 4th and 5th place. Jake Finn rolling around in 3rd after that pit stop. So now it'll be interesting to see what Chandler Williams decides to do as we are past the halfway mark of the race and entering the final corner, and does come into the pits. He does come into the pits, and now this is where the interesting battle of the pit crews happen. We'll ride with the helicam for Jake Finn, who is rounding or going into the toe of the boot. So he still has one whole sector to go, but Chandler Williams still rolling into the pit box as we speak. So he is going to have to stop and wait for his pit crew to refuel that car for at least 25 seconds. And maybe he does elect to take tires. We'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But Carlos Guzman is going to inherit the lead of the race. Currently sits in first place in that 39 Mustang. Chandler Williams still in the pits, and that is hard to see. Still standing there. The Nissan is going to roar by. We can hear it there in the distance. There it is, entering the braking zone of turn 1. This is going to be tight on pit exit. Chandler Williams is going to have the inside, but Jake Finn might have the speed here. He's got the warm tires. Who's going to have the advantage into the bus stop? This is the closest we've seen them yet so far. Finn going to the outside, now cutting back to the inside. Is he going to send a move down the inside? He's lining it up, but the Mustang has some mighty top speed and is able to pull away and gets ahead before the braking zone of the bus stop. And great Great stuff from our leaders there. That was indeed so close. That was absolutely epic battle out of the pit lane. And now for the remaining 22 minutes, Chandler Williams is going to have the Nissan hot on his wing, trying to apply the pressure and get him into any, or force the Mustang, I should say, into any sort of mistake to try to get by. But these two are super confident in both of these machines, able to extract the lap time exactly where they need it. And a fantastic in-lap from Chandler Williams was able to get him that position ahead of Jake Finn, despite his pit stop being 1 second longer than that of the Nissan behind. So good lap times from the Mustang, able to keep that, I should say, not really the lead, but it will be the lead once Guzman serves his pit stop, his mandatory pit stop, I should say, after 16 laps of racing so far. Still, the closest battle we have on track here is between our leaders, Chandler Williams and Jake Finn, teammates of the Please Brake T1 Racing. And with Chronotis diving into the pits early, might have a decent pace advantage over Guzman, who were pretty close. About 1.5 seconds separated the Ferrari and the Mustang, currently in the lead of the race, which has still yet to serve that pit stop. That GTR getting close but has no chance to pass yet. I 100% agree. It's just not getting close enough where it matters. The Mustang able to pull away a gap before the heavy braking zone so the Nissan can't even get side by side to try and force any side-by-side action into the braking zone, where the Nissan is super confident on the brakes. We can see it into a lot of the braking zones where that gap is almost getting bumper to bumper, but the Mustang able to pull away, and that Nissan can't do anything about it. But hopefully Jake Finn is able to find that little bit more pace he needs to take away the lead from Chandler Williams. This is for position between Buggy Watt and Darren Wicks. Buggy Watt, though, yet to serve a pit stop. Buggy Watt, from before, I know, likes to come into the pits pretty late. And this is a pretty typical strategy we've seen from Watt before, where he just pushes on for as long as he can before coming into the pits. Fun livery for Darren Wicks. Nice to see the skyline from the Need for Speed, or sorry, not the Need for Speed, what am I saying? The Fast and Furious franchise. I'm so used to seeing Need for Speed liveries that my brain just went there. But yeah, the Paul Walker Nissan Skyline. Good to see that fun silver and blue livery out on track, famously from the movies. Gonna try to get by the McLaren out on track. Of course, Buggy Watt doesn't have to give the position up. This is not a blue flag situation, and the Nissan getting really squirrely on the exit as they ride the curbs at the exit of turn 1, and Guzman is now in the pits from the lead. So this will be interesting to see just where Chronotis will go after that pit stop is completed. Our top two still the same position as before. Williams in front of Finn. The battle's gonna continue for the rest of the race. I absolutely assure you these two don't want to give anything up, getting inches from the wall, risking it all for just that little bit of lap time, just half a second separating these two for pretty much the entirety of the race so far. And now Chronotis is rounding out the final corner with Guzman still standing in the pits. This is going to be close. Guzman just now dropping off the jacks, getting rolling. Chronotis crossing the start-finish line. A pretty good lap time of 45.490, but Guzman able to stay in front of the race, or in front of Chronotis in the race, I should say, and still holds on to that third spot in the race, taking the bronze medal in round 1 if things continue to stand the way they are. Darren Wicks was able to get through Buggy Watt on track, now in 7th place, has 11 seconds to catch up to Potts Weaver, and these are the positions they will finish, if everything finishes this way, until Buggy Watt serves that pit stop, and it'll be interesting to see just where he comes out, because I remember him and Porkchop were having a good battle at the beginning of the race, with Porkchop in that 71 fan favorite Jag roaring around Watkins Glen in the West Coast Wednesday League this season. And of course, the battle we all want to see is for the lead of the race, just crossing over the start-finish line to start their 20th lap of the race. Still less than a second separating our top two, pushing the limits of the track, risking it all for those track limits, I see, with just over 15 minutes left in the race. We don't know the status, of course, of how many track limits they have, and hopefully they can provide us a bit of insight at the end of the race, just to see what sort of strategies they went on. Because based on my numbers, it looks like everybody so far has elected to take tires, but that, of course, is just a speculation based on the times I have, and that's pretty much all I can say about that. There we see the gap between Guzman and Chronotis, about 3 seconds. The Ferrari not quite able to close the gap through the pit stop phases, as Chandler Williams and Jake Finn were dealing with a bit of lap traffic of Dr. Porkchop in front in the Jag, but both now able to get through, and the battle will continue for the top spot in the race. They're the two mint cars we see rolling together, Finn and Porkchop. Big thumbs up to Porkchop from me for picking the Jag. Always fun to see that. As well as the old M6. I started to become a fan of the old M6 just before they released the M4, which was a bit unfortunate because then that of course became the overpowered BMW and the M6 became a little bit outdated. But still, nonetheless, enjoy seeing the cars that are less so often picked. Would be fun to see a championship of all of those less picked cars and just see which one of those is actually the best. But in this, we have the battle of the Ford, the Nissan for the top position of the race. Again, super close between these two for the entirety of the race so far. Even through the pit stop phases, nothing separated them. They were absolutely so close on the pit exit to where any little slip up from Chandler Williams could have given the position to Finn. And of course, track position is everything. We see it here, how difficult it is for the Nissan to stay close enough to force any sort of moves. A Jag Cup, now you're thinking. That would be absolutely fun to see. Maybe we can set up one of those fun races in the Jag and the Jag alone. But yeah, now Buggy Watt serves his pit stop in the McLaren, coming in from 7th place overall. Will be interesting to see where he comes out relative to Porkchop, who is just out of picture in the background of these two battling for the top spot. And Alex Freeman is closing the gap to Kyle Hirsch. 1.3 seconds between these two McLaren drivers, the 21 and the number 14, currently sitting in 8th and 9th place. Someone get the boss on the phone. I agree. Hopefully the boss is listening, watching along, taking in all the suggestions. The chat wants to see it, and if the chat wants to see it, we have to make it happen. And that's a rule, of course, because the customer is always right. Or something like that. Chandler Williams now with the fastest lap of the race, a 1:43.845. For the first time in a long time, the gap has opened up to more than 1 second on the timing charts, and he's got just a little bit of more wiggle room to try and pull away from the Nissan. And of course, the Nissan wants to stay as close as possible to get any sort of slipstream advantage. If you pull with or pull out of 1 second, that slipstream effect really starts to fade away, and that might really hurt the Nissan in the closing stages of the race to try and pull off a move for the lead. They have Sport McLaren here, though, still trying to close that gap to Kyle Hirsch. Just about 1 second is the gap between the two McLarens, suffering a bit of damage earlier on. Kyle Hirsch with the spin at the bus stop. Alex Freeman more than likely taking evasive action, hitting the front of his McLaren into the wall. Both coming into the pit stops pretty early, but the battle is going to continue on in the last 10.5 minutes of our round one season opener at Watkins Glen. 50-minute races all throughout the season. A fun 8-round calendar lies ahead of us, starting with this round here, of course, at Watkins Glen. All drivers serving their pit stops already. Chandler Williams pulling that gap even more to 1.7 seconds, setting another personal best. Fastest lap, a 1:43.595 for the Mustang in the lead of the race. Really able to find the pace now in the Mustang and pull away from the Nissan. Jake Finn, though, still has good pace. He's still maintaining the same pace he had, but Chandler Williams was just able to find that little bit of extra and just pull away just those extra few tenths to keep the gap a little more comfortable than a little more comfortable that he likes. There we see on the timing charts 1.7 between our top runners, 0.8 between Kyle Hirsch and the yellow and black McLaren behind, running wide at turn number 1 at Watkins Glen. A little bit favorable there, favorable with the track limits like we mentioned earlier before. So maybe everybody's figured out the limit or has put in an absolutely blistering time before to where they can't match that pace and no longer are picking up any sort of penalties through that section at all. Guzman pulling his gap over Cronotis up to 6 seconds now, so he's pretty comfortably sitting in that last podium position in 3rd place in the race. We'll see if anything changes in the closing stages of the race. He himself is around 20 seconds back of the front two, who have been battling it out for the whole race, but in the last few laps, Chandler Williams able to find just that little bit of extra pace and pulls out a 1.8 second lead over his friend in the Please Brake T1 team, Jake Finn, sitting in 2nd place in the Nissan. Guzman in 3rd, riding, or following, I should say, here with the cameras. Cronotis sits in 4th. Matt Artem making up a lot of places from the start in the Audi sits in 5th. Potts Weaver in 6th. Wicks in 7th. Kyle Hirsch, Alex Freeman 8th and 9th. Gonna keep battling towards the end of the race there. Curtis Rusted in 10th. Porkchop does get ahead of Buggy Watt after Watt serves his pit stop, who will round out our grid in 12th place. Alex Freeman, though, still trying to close that gap now, even closer than he was on the lap before. But it looks like Kyle Hirsch is pretty comfortable with how he is driving around with the McLaren of Freeman behind for company. Still rolling around in 8th and 9th as they were for the majority of the race. Mr. Finn losing time indeed. Now 2.2 seconds is the gap out in the lead for Chandler Williams, able to keep going with that impressive pace he had from last season and is gonna keep going the way he was going all season long last year, able to pick up the championship win, and is gonna start it off strong here in round 1 of this season as well. Matt Artem starting yet another lap of the 50-minute race, charging up the hill in that V10 powered Audi, keeping it close to the curbs, cutting down that lap time as much as he can. The America United Racing livery for Matt Artem this season. Always been in the Audi, if I remember correctly, was in the Audi last season as well. And so always fun, like I said, always fun to see a variety of cars on the grid. Currently the Audi not too popular of a choice, but good to see it rolling around, hearing that V10 roar as well as the one in the Lamborghini. Always fun to hear. Just about 5 minutes left in our 50 minutes race here at Watkins Glen in the West Coast Wednesday Championship at Trackalicious. Good racing so far. A few overtakes we've seen. A good move from Chronotis at the front, able to move him up into 4th place. And after that, it pretty much remained the same. Chandler Williams and Jake Finn were within a second of each other for the majority of the race, and in the last 15 to 10 minutes, Chandler Williams able to open up that gap to now 3.1 seconds over the Nissan. Perhaps the Nissan just eating away at those tires and having to really look after them now, as his pace has dropped just that tiny little bit more, 0.8 slower than his personal best on the last lap for Jake Finn. So perhaps just a bit of drop off in the tires of the Nissan. Jag rolling around in 11th place. Dr. Porkchop, the Chop Shop Racing, number 71. Still keeping it rolling. Bit of a gap in front, bit of a gap behind, but still finishing 11th. Nonetheless, is a good result. Good championship points haul as well for the next round, where I am sure more drivers will be joining us, as Watkins Glen is a bit of a DLC track, so maybe not everybody having it and not able to join this round, but able to join for the rest of them. And so hopefully we will see more drivers next week in the West Coast Wednesday Championship. Alex Freeman getting closer and closer now to Kyle Hirsch. This is the closest we've seen the two McLarens battling it out for 8th and 9th place. Pretty wiggly on the exit though for Freeman, not able to get the power down as efficiently as he would want to try and make a move on Kyle Hirsch. And that gap has really closed up in this last lap. Maybe a bit of a mistake from Kyle Hirsch somewhere where we didn't quite see, but nonetheless the battle is going to be picking up between these two. Pretty bumper to bumper stuff so far, with just under 3 minutes to go. Should be 3 laps for these guys to battle it out. Oh, and Hirsch is going to hit the wall with the left rear. Hopefully not picking up too much damage and still having the confidence that he needs to keep that McLaren ahead of Freeman and take 8th place in the race. Chandler Williams pulling away even more now. A 4-second gap to Jake Finn as he is going to cross the line. And that should give us 2 more laps to go. He should cross the line with about 5 seconds on the clock. So that should give us another racing lap and another racing lap for Kyle Hirsch and Alex Freeman to battle it out for that 8th place on track. Guzman rolling around still in 3rd place. Good gap in front, opening up the gap to Chronotis now to 10 seconds. Driver in 4th place in the 42 Ferrari, able to get a good overtake into turn 1 at the start and hasn't looked back since. Not quite able to close the gap on the podium sitters yet, but anything can still happen. But with how consistent these drivers have been going around, it would be pretty surprising to see anything go awry. Kyle Hirsch, though, running onto the curbs a little bit, getting a little bit slidey in that dive bomber's McLaren, just letting Alex Freeman inch ever so closer to the back of his own McLaren. And these two are going to cross the line for what may or may not be the final lap of the race for these two McLarens. Let's take a look and see. This is Chandler Williams getting through the traffic of Buggy Watt. 20 seconds left on the clock. We'll see if he decides to slow down and just take the checkered flag. But more than likely, I think he's just going to keep rolling around and give it one more loop around the Glen.
Alright, man, the leader is on the final lap. Give it a final push.
Then, as we hear from our race director, the leader is on the final lap with just about 5 seconds left on the clock. Now the clock ticks to 0, so this will be the final racing lap for Chandler Williams and all our other drivers once they cross the start-finish line one more time. Alex Freeman just not able to keep that car as close as he would like to the back of Kyle Hirsch in the battle of the two McLarens for 8th and 9th place. Fun battle, though, between them for the majority, or I should say at the beginning of the race. Kind of dropped off a little bit as they decided to take their pit stops. But Freeman showing good pace, able to recover pretty close to the back of Kyle Hirsch. But now Kyle Hirsch pretty confident again in that McLaren, even tapping the rear on the exit of the final corner, but still able to keep that car in front for now, but getting a little bit wiggly off that off-cambered exit and is letting Alex Freeman sniff the back bumper just that little bit more, and this battle is going to keep going for one more lap. And yeah, this is the closest Freeman has been in a long time to Kyle Hirsch. So let's take a look and see what happens in the final lap. But Chandler Williams, though, rounding the final corner in the number 3 Please Break T1 Mustang to pick up where he left off from last season, finishing in the top spot. Congratulations to him finishing in the lead. Takes the gold medal in round 1 with Jake Finn not too far behind in 2nd place in the Nissan. But this is the battle we want to see between Freeman and Kyle Hirsch, who are actually closing in pretty quickly to the Nissan of Darren Wicks, I should say. My apologies there. Maybe having to save a little bit of fuel. Oh no! Alex Freeman dipping a wheel onto the curb and spinning the McLaren, but keeping it out of the wall. And that battle for 8th place is gonna be settled. And Kyle Hirsch able to run away a little bit now with that one. Has Kyle Hirsch run out of fuel? What's happened here? He's going slowly as well. Is he just waiting for Freeman, or did he run out of fuel? There's Freeman going by. I think Kyle Hirsch just ran out of fuel. No. Just as we were saying it, he was running away. And no, he's just stranded with one sector to go. Oh man, unfortunate luck there for Kyle Hirsch. Unable to get across the checkered flag. I think Darren Wicks was doing a fair bit of fuel saving as well with a pretty slow... Actually, it wasn't that slow. Never mind. Actually, I don't know. I can't tell. I gotta learn this new software a little better. Brutal. Rip. No way. Indeed. After that mistake from Freeman, it seemed like Kyle Hirsch had 8th place done and dusted. But he couldn't cross the line to finish with enough fuel. And we'll see just where he ends up on track after that unfortunate miscalculation. Just not fueling the car enough. And of course, Chandler Williams crossing the line with just 5 seconds left. He could have maybe slowed down, but the gap just wasn't big enough to Jake Finn behind to do so comfortably. And that forcing everybody else to do one more lap. And maybe just that little extra lap didn't get Kyle Hirsch around. Man, that is an unfortunate mistake to see in the closing stages of a 50-minute race. But nonetheless, I think Kyle Hirsch will take 9th place after everything is done and dusted. Better to overfuel than to run out. I agree. I do that way too many times. So if he can't get to the line, is he DNF? You know, I'm not really sure how the game treats a situation like this. So that's a good question, though. I personally can't say I can answer that for sure. But yeah, that is tonight's race done for the round opener at Watkins Glen in the spring season. New season starting up. And of course, if you missed tonight and you want to sign up, sign-ups are open on SimGrid. So check it out there, as well as all the other championships that Trackalicious has to offer. There we see the finishing order on the left. Chandler Williams on top from pole position, having the fastest lap of the race. Came under pressure from Jake Finn in second for the majority of the race, but able to pull out a good gap towards the end and never looked back. Guzman, a good, nice and quiet race from him, finishing in 3rd place in the 39 Mustang. 22 seconds to the car in front, 23 to Chronotis behind. And unfortunately, I think it was Matt Artem who finished in 5th place with Darren Wicks in 6th. No, Darren Wicks finished 7th. Somebody else finished 6th. Potts Weaver finished 6th. Darren Wicks was 7th. 8th went to Freeman in the end because Kyle Hirsch had that incident. Let's take it back to our lovely studio here at Trackalicious. And of course, if our podium sitters want to join us for a quick interview, join us in the green room. I will go ahead and pull you in for a couple of questions and hopefully a few answers. So yeah, if you guys feel free to hop in the chat, and yeah, we'll get right to it. But if not, thanks everybody for watching. We really appreciate all the support. Thanks everybody watching along in the chat, chatting along. Good to see all your guys' thoughts about the race as well. Here we've got our top 2 in the green room. Let's pull in our first place sitter, Chandler Williams. Good evening, Chandler. How is it going?
Hey. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep. Loud and clear, my friend. Congrats on the race win, picking up right where you finished from last season, getting the championship win, and now starting off with the race win.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, you were under pressure for the majority of that race from, it looks like, your friend Jake Finn. You guys both have the Please Break T1 liveries. So I can only assume you guys are a bit of friends there. But yeah, under pressure the whole time from the Nissan behind. How were you able to keep him there for the majority of that race?
I was kind of shocked that he had that pace. I know he had the toe there in the straights, but yeah, he kept with me the first stint. Yeah, I mean, I just was keeping focus and didn't want to mess up. So, but yeah, I was kind of shocked that he had that pace because I was a little bit faster than him in quality. So that was really good on his part for having that. Unfortunately, the second stint he took too much fuel and he wasn't able to keep up because he had a lot more fuel than me. So
gotcha. Yeah, that can happen. We saw, unfortunately, the opposite happen to one of the drivers at the back with underfueling the car. And so, yeah. We were always saying better to overfuel than to underfuel. So, unfortunately, Jake Finn is suffering a little bit from that. But, yeah, that battle for the majority of that first stint was absolutely epic. And even out of the pit lane, it was almost side by side. And you were able to get that move done. Did you end up taking tires during the pit stop?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, it seemed like that was the choice for most of the drivers tonight with the pretty hot conditions at Watkins Glen. How were the tires feeling?
It was all right. I definitely felt at the end of the stint I was sliding a lot, but it was okay. It wasn't the best. Maybe I could have taken better care, but it was okay. It wasn't. It was fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Always tricky to do, though. You always want to push as hard as you can in the race. Well, thanks for joining us, Chandler. Once again, congrats on finishing in first place tonight. Off to a strong start in the season. Hopefully, we'll see many more battles and race wins from you in the remaining rounds.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Let's pull in good buddy Jake Finn now. Ask him a few questions as well. Hello, Jake. How are you doing this evening, my friend?
I'm doing well, sir.
Happy to hear that. You were applying the pressure the entire time to the back of that Mustang, but you just couldn't get by. Chandler Williams putting in consistent lap times here and there. You guys were battling it out for that whole first stint, exchanging fastest lap times. What were you trying to do to get by that Mustang?
I was just trying to stay in his slipstream for as long as I could. I was hoping for a mistake from Chandler, but he never really made too big of a mistake that I could capitalize on it. So yeah, just trying to be consistent and stay behind him as close as possible.
Yeah, fair enough. It seemed like, we heard from Chandler that you overfueled a little bit at the pit stop, I should say, and a bit of a weight disadvantage in the closing minutes. Really, it was super close, really, up until the last 10-15 minutes where it seemed like something happened. Do you also take tires during the pit stop, Jake?
Yes. I think that's the optimal strategy.
Yeah, it seemed
considering Watkins is pretty tough on tires.
Yeah, it seemed pretty hot as well for a little bit of the race too. So yeah, maybe just a little bit of overfueling. But yeah, it's good racing from you two. Always fun to see that at the front of the grid. Thanks for joining us, Jake. Is this your first season at Trackalicious for the Wednesdays?
Yeah, Chandler invited me because I live on the West Coast, so he thought, hey, why not invite Jake?
Perfect. Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. Congrats on finishing second in your first race with us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what sort of action you two can provide in the rest of the championship this season. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, Chandler and Jake, in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Boop, boop, boop. And yeah, congrats to everybody, and congrats to Carlos Guzman as well for finishing on the podium, not able to join us in the green room tonight. We got our raid ready. That is awesome news. before we get to that, let's take a look at our Trackalicious calendar and see all the fun racing that we have in store. On Mondays, the GT4 Rookies and the GT4 Open Championships in ACC take place starting at 8 p.m. Eastern for the Rookies and at 9:30 Eastern for the Open Championship. This is, of course, our fun long day on Mondays with the GT4s, and there are prizes on offer from Next Level Racing. The winner of the haptic gaming pad in the Rookies will be drawn at random, but you must finish 7 out of the 8 races to be eligible for that drawing. And then the championship winner of the GT4 Open Series will also win that same haptic gaming pad from Next Level Racing. So lots of fun prizes on offer there. We've already completed Imola and Hungaroring. We're going to Suzuka next week. Then LMU takes over on Tuesdays in the Multi-Class 60 Championship. 60-minute races on Tuesdays starting at 8:30 Eastern Time. And of course, signups are open on SimGrid for that race. Or for that series, I should say. Next race will be at Monza next week. Then on Wednesdays, we've got our GT3 West Coast Championship in ACC, like we saw tonight. Our season opener at Watkins Glen. We'll need to adjust that calendar a little bit. Indianapolis next week for a 50-minute race yet again. iRacing takes over on Thursdays at 8:30 Eastern with the mixed GT3 and GT4 Championship. Mugello next on the calendar. That will be tomorrow. And of course, if you're interested, signups on SimGrid for all of these championships are open. Fridays, LMU takes over again for the alternating championship of the Multi-Class Masters and the Orica Masters Cup, the multi-class of the hypercars and the GT3s, and the Orica Masters Cup is the LMP2 championship. This week will be the LM2 championship at COTA with a 60-minute race. No racing on Saturdays, but on Sundays we have the Next Level Racing GT3 Pro Championship starting at 8:30 Eastern Time. Lots of fun action on Sundays between some of the best drivers at Trackalicious. Gonna battle it out at Donington this week. So make sure you tune in for that. And of course, the winner of the Next Level Racing GT3 Pro Championship will win an ERS4 seat for their sim rig. And of course, that is a fun prize available from Next Level Racing on Sundays as well as in the Monday series. And with that calendar is being said. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the slightly small grid tonight at West Coast Wednesday with the 12 cars we saw on grid, but lots of fun action as well. And please do join us on SimGrid for more championships. Join the Discord at Trackalicious if you have any more questions. Thank you to Next Level Racing for providing all those fun prizes in the 2 championships we have available. And yeah, once again, thank you to all the chat. Eric, let's get that raid set up and going. Make sure you stick around and show the support from the Trackalicious community, from one sim racing community to another. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to all from our Trackalicious studio here tonight. Thanks again, everybody watching, everybody chatting along, everybody participating, and everybody in the background for getting everything set up. Let's hit that raid. Eric, thank you so much to everybody once again, and we will catch you next time.